today the schedule looks a bit like how research works, really. We kind of started with the database, started with the data, accessing the data, downloading it, and that kind of stuff. And now I suppose this part of the day is now looking at, how do we sort of display and visualize results, which is good for me because it means I get to show lots of shiny graphs and interesting stuff. Most of the slides here really are just showing ways of visualizing research which has been done on web archives. That said, I'm going to take quite a critical approach to visualization. It's not a panacea for sort of justifying research on its own terms. You need to, obviously, goes without saying, you need to be quite careful with how information is presented, just like any data source. But I suppose we're going to go through in sort of ascending order of sophistication. Start off with things that you can do in 10 minutes, which I can do, you can do in 10 minutes, all the way onto things which I don't entirely understand, but that have been published as part of papers that I've been part of. So it's sort of an increasing order of difficulty, but we'll see how we go. Just a quick kind of note at the start. A lot of the things that I'm going to be presenting come from or will be appearing in a book coming up, probably early 2016, I think, actually, UCL Press. It's sort of a multi-authored book, which is coming out of Oxford and also as a part of the Buddha project. So most of these things here, if you're intrigued, will hopefully be in print form eventually as well. But I suppose I'm just going to look at these topics, really. What can we answer and how can we show the answers that we get from web archives? These are some of the questions that I'm going to be looking at, so we'll look at these one at a time. We've already seen one engram today from Peter. This is just another look at it with the multi-search queries, which he mentioned. So this is to do this. It's as simple as going onto the web address there, hitting trends, entering a number of different distinct search terms, entering your year parameters, and just hitting go. And what we get when we search for, I hope you can see, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and David Cameron is quite a nice, historically quite satisfying visualization of how these politicians appear over time in the archive. So Tony Blair sort of is higher than everyone else until he resigns in 2007, and then Gordon Brown takes over. He peaks, and then Cameron takes over slightly earlier, but in 2010, by 2010, Cameron has taken over. So this isn't indicative of that much, but it is a nice way of just visualizing information in the archive and letting us know that maybe it has some claims to historical accuracy, although of course we can't, because of all the complexities of the data, we can't be entirely clear exactly the sort of the grounds on which that's the case. But that's your sort of cheap and cheerful, quick and easy way of looking at data within the archive and displaying something which has some kind of real world meaning, which I think is quite important when you're dealing with data of this size. This is kind of taking another step up, I suppose, although not hugely. I made these kind of graph maps on a program called Data Wrapper, which is another quite intuitive data visualization software used a lot by journalists to give you a sense of the sort of the expertise required. And I wasn't supposed to be sarcastic, and it really in this case we're looking at pages inside on the left Cambridge University's website and on the right Oxford University's website, looking at to which European web domains pages in those archives link to. So you can see that in the case of Cambridge, on the left, there's 7,833 pages inside the cam.ac.uk domain, which link to French web pages or web pages ending in .fr. This is data which I gathered completely from the Shine interface. You simply go on and do the search and filter by first filter by the domain that you want to look at, and then also filter by what domains they link to. So for the 50 or so results, about 20 of those are in Europe, which are the green ones here, and the darker the green, the more links there are to those pages inside the UK Web Archive, inside these university websites. And again, not much of a demonstration of anything in strict terms, but having Oxford and Cambridge side by side and having them look vaguely similar is vaguely encouraging to me as a researcher. It tells me that there's something which coheres quite nicely about the data, and there's nothing particularly to see nothing that strikes out that seems dead wrong. The greyed out countries aren't that there's no research at all or no links at all to those sites or to those domains. It's more the fact that by default the interface limits it at the top 50. So there's 50 domains that it pointed to, and so not all the countries in Europe are included in that top 50 list. But it feels kind of right. And again, this is pretty straightforward software. just creating a search, creating a list of search results in the interface, exporting the results, and then pumping them back into this data wrapper software, which is all free and easily available online. So now we get a bit more complicated. I'm going to be presenting a series of findings from a paper which we originally published at a conference last year, but it's going to be also a chapter in the book. We're looking at, again, universities, but specifically how do their links, the links between them on the internet, how do they relate to existing offline factors, including quite a few interesting ones. So we developed a list of 120 or so universities, basically every university in the country. And we had a list of all the links between them, as it were, and we tried to weigh this up against different factors. And all of these have visualizations which are interesting, which I'll talk about. So the first thing we looked at is, does a university's membership of a particular group, let's say the Russell Group is the most well-known one, but there's 5 there. Does a university's membership of a group give them any more tendency to link towards a fellow member of that group, that research group, as opposed to a other random university? And the answer, as you might be able to tell, is, well, no, not really. If they did link more, we'd expect to see a lot more clustering, as we call it, in this network graph here. But there's not a lot. The green block, I should say, the size of the circles relate to the size of the number of pages, I think, in each website. I think we need to check that one. But the colours obviously relate to different groups. The green blobs are the Russell group, so you can not really, but kind of see some kind of tendency there, and there's some in the bottom left corner. The yellow ones look fairly close by, but like this is borne out by the sort of the mathematical side of this, where we said actually doing the maths, if you were to construct 5 random clusters, they would be as likely to link together as these. So there's no relationship there. But again, the visualization is a quite nice way of displaying that, even if it is kind of a null hypothesis or a null finding. It's quite a good way to show it. Then we looked at league tables, and we said, does having a high position in a university league table, does that have an inverse relationship to a positive relationship to your likelihood to receive links from other universities? So does being in the top 10 of the league tables, does that mean you're going to get more links from other universities in the data set? And here we found a bit more indication of some significance. So on the left-hand side, you've got 10 different measures of centrality, because we want to do a good job on this. So we took 10 different ways of measuring it for 2005 at the top and 2010. And we found that using in strength, which is one of the measures of centrality, I think it's basically the density of links coming to you from other universities. We found there is an interesting, fairly significant kind of association there, as you can see. And on the right, you can see that there's what appears to be quite a positive correlation there, but with quite a few caveats as well. So sort of inching towards something kind of a bit more meaningful that we found using the data combined with real-world factors. And then geographic location. We visualized how strong the links are between different universities based on their location. And we did find some significance here. We found that there was this matched earlier research and citation rules, which found that actually the strength of how close geographically universities are does link to their likelihood to link together. So I won't bother going through those maps too specifically, but you can see it's another nice way of visualizing by geography. And then finally, we want to ask the final question: what does the UK web look like? So to do this, we use these nice notions of subdomains, and we looked at how they all basically how the size of the domains changes over time. So on the left, you can see that this is kind of an absolute size, and it's logarithmic on the left, which explains why they're quite close together, despite the .co domain being much bigger than the others. And on the right, we kind of group them all together into one big chart, and you can see over time that .co is very significant over time compared to the others, particularly increasingly over time. So that's another nice way of showing it. And then this I won't go into this too much, but this is linking between domains. So to see how different sectors of the UK web link to each other, and how the sort of strength of links going from different domains linked to each other. And you can see that there's kind of a quasi-meaning of these different domains. So .org.uk kind of implies charities, .gov.uk government, and things like that. So you can see there the strength of links going between different domains. Finally, I just want to end on this kind of cautionary note. This is a really fun, quite funny graph I saw, which seems to imply that when Florida enacted its stand your ground laws to increase gun rights, gun deaths went down. But actually, it was an axis mislabeling, very intentional, and it completely reversed what you think you see. So on the left, if you see there, the y-axis is actually in reverse, and the accurate way of portraying it would be this. So I just said that with great visualization power comes great responsibility. In this regard, you have to obviously be careful about how you're displaying this data in terms of how it appears on the page. So just to summarize this kind of this final thing, we can take some questions. There's a lot to do here. There's a lot to be done with this data, and there's a few relatively easy ways of doing it. You can get into the Shine interface, which has been developed. Also, more like general purpose visualization software to use the data you've got from the archive and plug it back in. But when you can use things which are in the web, it gives you more kind of authority. So things like hyperlinks, which are born on the web, so we can talk with great sort of significance about hyperlinks because they're part of the archive inherently. Same with subdomains in the UK, using these domains and seeing how they relate to each other. And also, where possible, drawing in offline data is a great way of testing how this big web archive of fairly messy data stacks up against real-world facts. So, like we had with universities, how do offline factors really relate to, or do they relate to the online data itself? And finally, my note there would be, do be careful what you're showing and what you think you're showing, maybe what you're not showing when you're visualizing data in this way. That was quite short because I want to leave some time for questions and maybe we can catch up on time as well. But yeah, that's sort of an overview of the sort of research being done in this area and some of the pitfalls to maybe avoid if you're trying to visualize data in different ways. So if there's any questions, we can. Or not.
Josh, could you just say a word or two about, you said basic visualizations are quite easy, the Shine and Google Ngram, Data Wrapper and stuff like that. Some of the other ones that you showed there, how accessible are they in that sense? Are there free versions, number one? And some of that is basic, and how much data do you really need to have to get some meaningful kind of interesting kind of results?
Yeah, so it was not only ascending order of difficulty of the talk, I suppose, but also ascending order of the size of the data. So in these last few ones, looking at the web in totality, well, we'd expect the data set to be massive there, and the kind of computational power and the sophistication needed to do this kind of stuff is above my pay grade, and also beyond the reaches of sort of the average informed but not expert researcher in web archives. So these kind of the charts I think are quite, once you kind of understand them, are quite revealing in relation to what it says, but they do take a bit of understanding as a reader, let alone knowledge as a researcher to put them together. And also I should say these ones came from a data source which, although originated with the Wayback Machine in the British Library, was actually a different set of linked data, which came out of that. So in some ways this is beyond what you'd expect to be able to do, just pick it up and kind of running with it, or even in the context of, let's say, a PhD, even spending a couple of months trying to familiarize yourself with this, I'm not sure, it depends on the data a lot, but I'm not sure how well I'd be able to pick it up in just a relatively short period of time. This is more computer science stuff, but I thought I'd run the whole gamut of visualization.
And one other one, in going back to the Buddha project,
Yeah.
Did you help Harry to create?
I didn't. I think he did that. Peter, did you? I think he did it himself. Gephi is the name of the vision. Yeah, right. And I mean, he, as you said earlier, spent a lot of time on that. I think. I don't know whether he had much previous experience with that or whether he just.
A little bit, not that much.
He seemed to just devote a lot of time and make it work. And that was, that came out great, and that looked very. I wish I could show it actually, but it looked very sophisticated in terms of what it was able to show. And I think Gephi is a tool that takes a bit of time to pick up, but maybe you can get results from it with enough effort.
And it's free.
And it's free, yes, another big thing. Yeah.
Was it, correct me if I'm wrong and if I have a mismemory in that, essentially it was trying to show connections of links to and links from over time and how they change, was that? Yes, I don't know if it was links or I think it was links, yeah. Using the different
armed forces,
Yeah.
armed services as different nodes, which is another thing as well. Another thing he got right, I think, in his approach was to say, well, let's take the MOD as a whole, but let's use these kind of hierarchies built into the website. So there are 3 or 4 armed services, so let's group them into different groups. They've all got different subdomains. So that nice kind of clean-cut way of saying the data we have relates to the offline reality in a meaningful way, in the sense that Navy and Army don't cross over that much, in the same way their websites don't cross over that much, and where they do, let's explore that. So using any cues you have from either from the offline world or anything that's built into the data, in such as links, is a really good way of getting at this and making some meaningful sense out of this all this data. Was there a question at the front?
Just a reminder that if you're interested in information visualization, Chase program is running an information visualization workshop on the 25th of June at the Open University. I'm about to reopen registration for it, because I had originally closed it. There are 2 tickets listed as still available out of a total capacity of 20, so if you're not registered for it and you'd like to come, you'll be able to register in about a couple of minutes once I finish updating the site. Okay.
But yeah, as well, if you do have a background in information visualization in general, then those tools, I'm sure, can be applied to the Web Archive within reason, as long as the data kind of talks to itself. But what was really encouraging for me with this university thing, which didn't take very long, was that the data which came out of the archive with very little cleaning fit into this quite generalized data visualization software. So it worked really well to just think, oh, actually, the output from the archive it works as an input into a way of portraying it, which was encouraging.
Or another way to kind of consider that is it's a way to confirm the validity of your data. If you do comparisons between the two, and that's one way to kind of to give yourself a bit of extra strength in that if you're able to kind of show that they're
right. I mean, yeah, exactly. The line's quite blurred, but I'd say these ones are more kind of descriptive, for want of a better term. They're indicative. Whereas I think later on, when we start integrating the sort of offline stuff into the data, it's a visualization, but actually the visualization is the answer to the question in a sense, because you're sort of combining different data together. So it very much depends what you want to use it for, but there's plenty of tools out there. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks very much. Cheers.